I'm Fiona Gilmore from Suffolk Energy Action Solutions, SEAS. We are your hosts for this evening. It's wonderful to see such a full church. I've got a couple of housekeeping announcements, but firstly, we've convened this hustings because nationally significant energy projects are, we believe, a critical defining issue for this constituency. You may be very familiar with our organisations. It kind of sounded like you were, which is great. But what we do, essentially, it's the kind of Ronseal does what it says on the tin. Energy solutions, stopping Sizewell C. If you're not familiar, please do pick up some materials as you leave this evening. Before I introduce our chair, Bishop Martin Seeley, I want to advise that BBC Suffolk are here. They may be recording some of these events. There's also a gentleman here recording at the front. We've asked them to film only the backs of people's heads to ensure anonymity. Provide a fair opportunity for every candidate to speak. So we'd be grateful, please, if you would let them do so. Don't interrupt their answers. You may observe police officers in attendance. They're not here because we're expecting disturbances, but this is standard practice for events involving candidates. But we are grateful for their presence. Thank you. We have 4 candidates tonight. The Reform Party changed their candidate at the last moment. We have invited their candidate, but they've not responded. And quickly, just to introduce the process, each candidate will make a short opening statement. We have selected from the many, many questions you submitted, 5 questions which reflect, I think, the majority of the kinds of questions that people were asking. So please don't be disappointed if your specific question hasn't been chosen. Hopefully the issues you're concerned about will be covered. And there will also be a closing statement. We aim to finish at about 7:30. So without further ado, I would like to pass to our chair. We're very grateful this evening to have in the chair Bishop Martin Seeley of Grace and Evans.
To be here. Can I just echo from Alison's words? It's lovely to see a full church. My job is principally to keep everybody to time, and so I'll be whispering behind the candidates or next to the candidates if I want them to chivvy up a bit, so that we get through the 5 questions in the course of the hour. And our opportunity here is, as Alison has said, is to listen to the 4 candidates presenting their views, their positions, and I encourage us to listen well to that. And without further ado, I will call on Alison to give me the first, the opening statements. So, and we've drawn straws for who goes first on the opening statements, and the first one will be Julian Cusack from the Green Party.
Thank you, Chair. So let me start off by expressing my heartfelt thanks to Stop Sizewell C and to the Suffolk Energy Action Solutions for organising this hustings. And more importantly, for their valiant and ongoing support for our local communities in the fight against Sizewell C and the Friston substation site. I stand with you, but I do need to declare an interest. I live in the village of Middleton, 3 miles from the site of Sizewell C, and I've been a visitor to Minsmere since I was a little boy growing up in the 1950s. And Sizewell Marshes, a site of special scientific interest, used to be one of my go-to places for calmness and serenity. Alas, no more. I plan tonight to address 2 false narratives. The first is the false narrative about new nuclear power. We are being told that we need Sizewell C to keep the lights on. I don't think that's true, and I shall try and explain why as we go through this evening. The second false narrative is that an offshore grid with brownfield site connections onshore is not an option. I revisited Friston today to remind myself of just how unsuitable it is as a site for a massive substation. The only reason it is in the frame is that in 2017, in a totally undemocratic process, an offer was made to Scottish Power of a connection agreement in the Leiston-Sizewell area. I call this the original sin. It led on, as many in this church tonight predicted, to a proliferation of Me Too projects, all wanting to connect to Friston. We'll talk about this, I'm sure, as we go through this evening. Thank you all for coming out tonight to hear the candidates, and I look forward to your questions.
Grace Coffee.
Good evening, everybody. We need to be energy independent, and we need to tackle climate change. And that is why I have consistently supported low or zero carbon energy, and it's why I continue to support that we have renewables, offshore wind preferably, but not the unnecessary, damaging energy infrastructure that we are seeing in the likes of Friston, Saxmundham and elsewhere. Now, I'm very conscious that when an offshore wind farm was first proposed, it was going to come on at Bordsea, and it was going to be done by direct current, so lots of the energy could come in one go, and the developer worked with the council very well, I was involved, to make sure that that infrastructure we pulled it through was going to be the way that pretty much every energy wind farm would get connected. However, that changed. And that's why since 2017, I've been vocal in my opposition to the proposal of Friston. It's why as a minister, I managed to get policy changed about cumulative impacts to consider both the offshore and onshore transmission infrastructure. But I am concerned that as with our acceleration to net zero, that we haven't been listened to. I have continued to fight that within government, and of course I've been even more vocal having left government. So we need to make sure that we have the energy for the future, but I will continue to oppose the energy infrastructure at Friston, at Saxmundham, and to promote offshore grid, and to promote actually brownfield connections, whether that be Bradwell, whether that be Tilbury, whether that be Isle of Grain, closer to London. Thank you.
I had the third straw. And I'd like to thank everybody here for speaking, because of course they're saying exactly what I feel too. So I'm not going to take you back through that, because this is also about selecting a new MP, and I thank you very much for being here this evening. On televised election hustings, the main parties come across with the sound and fury, both claiming that they had a plan whilst offering no detail. Professionalism and integrity have been missing. In the second instalment was Suffolk politician Daisy Cooper, and she's a Liberal Democratic member, she's our deputy leader, holding firm the party's sensible and pragmatic policies in areas that really, really matter to you: social care, health, education, and of course, with regards to power and the environment. So what's not to like about an ambitious vision? Suffolk Coastal is so fragile with its vast onslaught of imminent energy projects. Remarkably, it's been left up to the public and to our lobbyists here to propose an environmental strategy, because national government, frankly, simply has not listened. So, with so many challenges, Coastal's new MP must be laser focused on going forwards. From day one, as your new MP, I will reshape the position. It will be a role that everyone can relate to, particularly the lobbying groups, and we will not be influenced by London alone. I'm an established politician. I live here, I have raised our family here, and I have a business here. I've been elected here. Since doubling the vote in 2019, I've worked strategically on building relationships that will ensure I'm a successful MP, and I will be on the case of everything that we're going to discuss this evening. My name is Julia Ewart. I'm on the party executive of the Environmental Liberal Democrats, and with your support, I look forward to being your new MP. Thank you.
So now it's Jenny's turn. You think the least I could do is get the names of
Yes.
There are only 4 of them.
Brilliant, thank you. I want to talk about something a bit different. We're going to spend the next 45 minutes now after this talking about energy, and I know that we've got lots of questions to get through, but I want to talk about something different, and that is change. Since its conception, this constituency has been represented by the Conservatives, and there's been no chance of a breakthrough in that stalemate. Over the last 14 years, we've been let down by a Conservative government, and in the past 5 years, when we needed it most and when it mattered the most, we had chaos of government, and we need to move on and turn the page on that chaos. This is the place that I grew up. I went to school here, I had my first part-time job at university, and I care deeply about this constituency. And I know how special it is, and I know that we all know how special it is. I know we deserve better, and for the first time in my life, and probably for the first time in most of yours, there is a real chance for change here in Suffolk Coastal. In some polls, Labour wins the seat by 1%, and in some polls, we lose it by 1%. But however you read the polls, upside down, inside out, however you slice that cake, it's a 2-horse race between the Conservatives and Labour. And I know from the doorsteps, so I've knocked on nearly 10,000 doors, spoken to 3,000 people with my team, and I know so many people are going to be voting Labour for the first time in their life. And many of you are lending your vote to us from the Greens and the Dems. And some of you, I know, are still undecided. And to you, I have 2 pledges. One is the prospect of a local MP working with a Labour MP working with the Labour government. I'll be a strong voice in Parliament, making sure that we're heard on the issues that matter. And secondly, perhaps most importantly, the chance to change the course of history in this seat. Only Labour can break that cycle right now and break the political stalemate in this constituency. And the course of future of politics will change with that. So, I can see my 10 seconds are up. It's time for change, it's time for a fresh start here in Suffolk Coastal.
So what happens now is we've got 5 questions. I'm going to read out the question, and then we'll go in hopefully a reasonably random order in terms of answering them. And I'm going to suggest that actually Julia starts with answering this one. So I'll give you the microphone. But let me read the question first.
That would be helpful.
So this is from Charlotte Fox in Sternfield. The race is on to achieve net zero by a given date. But does your party recognise that setting an arbitrary date that may turn out to be unrealistic, over-ambitious and unattainable will be counterproductive in the long term and will lead to short-term decisions being made that are not in the nation's best interests? At the moment, the only proposals on the table for development of electricity transmission and conversion in East Suffolk are National Grid's plans, which are, of course, in National Grid's best interests, not national interests. So, does your party recognise that although cost and speed are obviously of paramount importance, getting this right for the future, and we only get one go at this, is absolutely critical, and not to consider the option of an offshore grid amounts to negligence? Julia.
I could be here all night with that, couldn't I? My party is very concerned about the whole deal of getting to net zero. We're saying 35, we're saying 40, and it's really hard to get there, particularly in an area like this. We have got so many projects. You're absolutely right, Charlotte, thank you for that. We've got so many projects ongoing, and the most important thing, as we've learned here, is they're not tied together, are they? The Sizewell C does not stack up with what they're doing on the offshore grid. But I've been looking at really sensible solutions. One of the things I learned very early on was, one of the reasons that they're not thinking about doing offshore is the procurement. The procurement of the cabling is likely to take 7 years. So I've taken it upon myself to go and track down through the British Association of Cabling, a company that can come to Felixstowe, that can go to Freeport East. Because the best thing we can do is develop our own cabling and be able to use that. They can bring it in. You may not know about what's happening down in Felixstowe, but essentially it's a tax-effective place to be able to develop a product. And if we can do that, and we bring the minerals on shore, and we send the cabling offshore, we're in a better position. Because as Charlotte quite rightly challenged us, this is all about timing. And so I know that my party are wanting to investing in development and R&D, and it's a great opportunity for Suffolk Coastal to do something absolutely here. Thank you.
Pass the microphone to Julian.
So thank you, Charlotte, for the question. I would say a couple of things. First of all, I do think that a commitment to net zero by 2050, or even earlier if possible, is really important for us to help keep the world safe for our children and grandchildren. But I do also believe that we need to take care that we don't rush into decisions that we will regret and that future generations will regret. So, looking at the prospect for an offshore grid, I'm a member of the Suffolk Preservation Society, and I've read their recently commissioned report, Greening the Great Grid Upgrade, and they produce a very sensible analysis that suggests that the need case for some of the reinforcements and other infrastructure being proposed has maybe been overstated, and they're suggesting a pause to really think through and make sure that we are designing this great grid upgrade in a way that makes sense. So yeah, I am very worried that the opportunities for a North Sea grid are being overlooked, and I think that Ofgem got it about right when they said that a meshed North Sea grid provides a smaller onshore footprint, and that's something that we should definitely look at. Thank you for the question.
Jenny?
Brilliant, thank you. So, look, Labour's clear in its plans that we want to be delivering clean energy by 2030 with an ambition to deliver net zero by 2050. And as part of the announcements that have come out over the last few months and will be set out further in more detail in the manifesto, there's been some clarity around the Great British Energy, and that's an £8.3 billion programme that will be delivered over the course of the next Parliament. And all of that is seeking to drive investments in clean energy, and we have to be able to have those ambitions and have to drive them forward. And we know that the East of England, hence why we're here today talking about it, will play a huge role in that. So energy and the drive to clean energy and subsequently net zero is absolutely critical, and I don't think anybody could at the moment challenge that we have to be on that course and we have to deliver at speed and at pace. In terms of the grid upgrades, I think, look, we are where we are because it hasn't been invested to date, but we cannot deny that we need to do a considerable investment in our grid infrastructure. We're not able currently to connect huge amount of onshore and offshore to the grid across the country, and that's something that clearly needs to be sorted at pace and at scale. And this has not come as a surprise. We have seen the energy, the renewable offshore and onshore be driven, and there is the plans that have been in place for driving this have just been stalled by the lack of conservative will, to be honest. And we need to drive it forward at pace and at scale. And where those decisions, I'm sure we'll come on to this in the next few questions, but where that connectivity lands and how it lands absolutely needs to be debated further. And I don't think you'll find much disagreement, actually, ironically, between the four of us on the current plans for the landing, particularly at Fiston, and how that needs to be revised. But we cannot be complacent on that delivery.
Thank you for your question, Charlotte. And I'm conscious in particular how Stonfield will be affected, in particular by what's happening with the proposals for Saxmundham and Lining. But what I will say is that when there was an attempt to do some coordination, which we had been looking to do, what's ended up happening is it's actually got worse for our area. And I think this has been driven a lot by officials and National Grid working together. And if I think about how Sizewell C to be built, they don't need any extra pylons, they don't need any extra connections, that's already part of their plan. So it's the extra things coming in. And then when we see gathered with the connection station and connection points they have, and I don't know if there are people from Sizewell here today, but we went through that stages of cables, the developers actually listened, and we came up with a reasonable situation. What's now happened, unfortunately, and I think it is because of the ambition to get as much as possible into renewable energy, is that in effect, I think that people just thought this part of the country, you've already had this stuff, so that it won't be much of a problem. And that's why I've been so impressed by the campaigners who absolutely stood up, put their money where their mouth is and gone to court. Now, I know it's not worked so far, but we must keep trying. I do believe that we need to continue this opposition. Nautilus has been stopped for now. I'm determined to try and make sure that sealing just does not need to happen. If it's going to connect, it should go from the Isle of Grain to Tilbury. And that's why I keep opposing the different elements of the line link as well. But I will say something about the people who want to be the next government, the Labour Party, for Norwich, and they have committed to their 2030 decarbonisation grid. That absolutely means that all the projects that are here along this coast will go ahead with gusto. For me, there's still a window of opportunity, recognising that Rishi Sunak changed some of the connection elements to be 2035 in terms of net zero, and that will affect actually and has helped a lot of rural areas here in terms of moving away from conventional fuel in terms of how they heat their homes. So I think there's still a window of opportunity, but I don't pretend it's going to be straightforward, but I will keep fighting.
Victoria Hamley in Aldeburgh. The Resolution Foundation this week quoted a £33 billion hole in public finances. Should the public be forced to pay half the £40 billion plus cost of Sizewell C through taxation and higher energy bills when our public services such as the NHS, social care and our schools are on the brink of collapse? And I'm going to give this to Jenny to start.
Brilliant, thank you. Sorry, I've got the name saying that question.
Victoria.
Thank you, Victoria. Look, the Resolutions Foundation report highlighted a number of concerns for how that cost can be passed on, and some of those I don't doubt the issues around in broad terms. But look, where we have to drive forward clean energy, we have to have capacity within our energy services, and we have to be able to fight at its core the cost of living crisis, and that comes from driving more energy, cleaner energy, and being able to build our capacity with it. And we've seen the consequences over the last 2 years since the war in Ukraine, where a spiralling cost of living is driven from spiralling energy costs, and we have to be able to build that capacity within the UK, to be able to make sure that over the time that we can keep those energy prices down. And there are a series of difficult decisions to be made in the short term and the long term, specifically with Sizewell. I do just want to respond to what the trade's made. That look, if Labour were in government, any of the challenges, there are going to be considerable challenges in driving forward our ambition for energy, not least here in the Southern Coast, but across the West End in particular. But the only voice that will be heard by Labour government is a local Labour MP. So we are at a point where we're going to have these battles and drive forward with pace, and I don't doubt that we do need to drive forward with pace to deliver our ambitions. But we must have a voice that's able to talk to a Labour government, to represent the needs of this community here, and not be scared or concerned about having those conversations, those challenging conversations that matter.
Julia?
I think my response has to be that this is all very local, and at the end of the day, we don't have a very strong presence from Labour in our district and local councils, and that's very important to discuss, because at the moment we have a Tory government that is running the local county council. And that is really strategic as to how things will play out. We must think about that. We have to work together in going forward with regards to funding. So, You're absolutely right, Victoria. The concept, as we talked about only yesterday, the concept of the RAB method of attaching a bill to every single person's electricity bill in the future is really not acceptable. We have to think things in a different way. But the public don't understand that there are different pots to do different things. And where we have a real problem as to, with regards to the size of the sea, is that nobody wants to invest in it. I'm hearing, and this is really on the street, that the UAE have no interest currently because our local governments are not match ready. They've not built those roundabouts, they've not built those roads. Yet we're supposed to suck it up and live locally and tolerate what's going on. So I think there's a much bigger conversation to be had. And what is really disruptive is that Victoria, who's tucked away in Aldeburgh, is even having to think about it. I'm with you, Victoria. We should be putting our funder in far better places. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. And in terms of how government will allocate its funding, that is often why it will go to the private sector to have those longer-term infrastructure. Because if you think about locally, I'm just thinking out loud, there's a brand new emergency department opening later this year. There's a new state-of-the-art orthopaedic centre where elective surgery will be done, and that will help to reduce waiting time and waiting lists. All that money that's from taxpayers, that capital money, if we didn't have external financing to help support some of this infrastructure, then frankly it would never get built, and that's been the problem in the past. So if I go back a decade though, when the Liberal Democrats were in coalition with the Conservative government after the 2010 election, the Liberal Democrats were opposed to nuclear, fair position for them to take, but they objected to any aspect of financing, and that's when external financing started to involve the Chinese. And you had a situation where 2/3 of the cost of developing Hinkley and potentially Sizewell C in the future was all about financing. Now by changing the financing model, that reduces the cost, which is good news for taxpayers, it's good news actually for bill payers in the longer term, and it means that we will get a situation where we can get reliable energy built. Now in terms of just thinking through about, I do know Rachel Reeves pretty well actually, and her husband was permanent secretary or second permanent secretary in the department. I was delighted to have him, give him his first Home Sec job. But it is about that interaction that you have to go in actually fighting pretty hard in Parliament, and that is what I will continue to want to do. And I have to say, Rachel Reeves was here, or in Norwich, saying pylons would go ahead. So there's no doubt about that in what is coming. But I do appreciate, and I appreciate it can be challenging when you have to go against your own party, but at times you do. One final thing I would just say though, in terms of local, is that we need to make sure that we keep our council really focused on what is happening right now, both the Sizewell and the projects. The current administration, the Lib Dem Green administration, have delegated some of those decisions to officers. It's really important that the political people you elect do have that direct interaction and not delegated. And I think that's critical in some of the issues that we are starting to face already with the Sizewell C.
Julie. Thank you. So Victoria's question was, with a 33 billion hole in public finances, does it make sense to ask the public to invest 40 billion in Sizewell C? My answer is no, it doesn't.
No.
And I think I'll leave it at that.
That's it.
The question is from Fiona Cram from Friston. Does your party recognise that all the proposals for onshore electricity transmission and conversion in East Suffolk are being driven by National Grid, a publicly listed company motivated by generating profit for its predominantly US and UAE shareholders, and that in the absence of any onshore competition, it has an effective monopoly that is allowing it to drive its proposals through in a dominant fashion that is preventing any proper consideration of development of an offshore grid? Will your party ensure that the costings for onshore development are properly costed by neutral advisors against the development of an an offshore grid. These costings should also include the cost to the ecology, tourism economy and communities. Do you pledge to push for the full evaluation?
Very good question.
Thank you, Fiona. The way the law acts at the moment, and has done for a considerable time, is that National Grid are obliged to offer a connection to basically people who apply. Now that has changed relatively recently, and also has changed is the fact that the energy system operator, as it's called, side of National Grid will become a state-owned company. It's due to happen sometime this year. So getting rid of that kind of the commercial side and splitting it out. So just so people are aware, that was part of the Energy Act and is happening this summer. Now, it doesn't take away from the fact that National Grid have been told they have to do everything pretty much or try and make sure it's at the lowest cost. And that is leading to quite a lot of the issues that we have right now. So that is also, by the way, in the legislation that Ofgem has to be minded in its decisions about cost of bills, more broadly right across the country. So coming back to it, I do think that we got somewhere with the options. It actually did show that cabling all the way could be economic in terms of what was being proposed between Norwich and Tilbury, but they did not do the full transparency. Now, admittedly quite late on, actually a week after Dan Poulter defected to Labour, I took his place on the Energy Committee and we were about to start going into more detail and using the powers of Parliament to get that information, because I have been trying, and so far it's been resisted through FOIs and similar. So absolutely agree, full transparency, cards on the table. I do believe that connecting closer to London is the way forward and is economically would be better, not only in the longer term, in the medium term too.
So, Julia.
Thank you, Fiona, for the question. I think that what I would say is that National Grid appears to be one of the least accountable organisations in the whole of the United Kingdom set up. It's a monopoly owned in the private sector, and I think that makes for built-in conflicts of interest, as is implied in the way the question was put. So what that required is very effective regulation. It needs central government to step up and realise that the planning of the Great Grid expansion needs to have a holistic viewpoint and to be done with the benefit of the communities and taxpayers and bill payers in mind, not at the whim of the engineers in the National Grid. That frankly has not happened, and although there are signs, as Teresa said, of some recent awakening of the understanding that there needs to be more strategic planning, it's a bit late, and there's been 14 years of a Conservative government, so have got only as far as they've got in that huge realisation of the strategic importance of this is a little disappointing.
So just to go back to the question was, is your party involved, will they have an appetite for this? And that's very much the case. In fact, only recently, Vera Hobhouse, who heads up the climate cluster for the Lib Dems, stepped in because we're getting no sense out of the Tory party with regards to what's going to happen. So I introduced them, and I'm really glad to say it has been taken on board. But we have an epidemic, really, don't we, locally? It's not just National Grid, it's the bank, it's the post office, it's Ofwat. Everybody's cozied up. And that's why we have these problems, because there is no way of having pure governance in the way that you all have to operate your businesses, and they therefore constantly get away with it. I'm really delighted to say Vera is right at my side, and should I be your MP, we are going to be able to tackle this in a much more firm way. Thank you.
Listen up for this. So I think there's a few points within that whole question right there. It's about scrutiny, about transparency, about cost effectiveness, and it kind of brings to light a number of different issues that we're seeing across the constituency, or whether we have concerns. And I think, look at the root of it, there hasn't been. I really feel this so sincerely, and I can feel it in the room, and I feel it on the doorstep. people here have been let down. We know that we are the custodians of this community. We're the custodians for the interest that we have in how our environments run, how our energies run, and how we're shaped, and the conversations that we have. And long after any organisation or any politician has packed up and left, it's the community that will be the custodians and hold these issues and move forward with them. So we must have a strong voice in Parliament. We must be able to hold to account decisions that are made here, and that's not just limited to National Grid. That's not just limited to energy. That includes all organisations that have an interest and benefit from here across Suffolk Coastal and across Suffolk as a whole. We must have scrutiny and we must hold them to account. And again, I repeat my risk of repeating myself now, it's only with a strong voice, a strong Labour voice in Parliament, with working with the Labour government, that we will have any chance of being able to have the right conversations that matter when they matter most.
Bearing in mind that the UK government is now the majority shareholder in Sizewell C, do you support taxpayers' funds being used for multi-billion contracts with EDF subsidiary Framatome, including a long-term fuel supply agreement under which Framatome will fabricate the fuel needed to power the two reactors when Framatome has close ties with Putin's nuclear operator Rosatom? And do you consider nuclear energy to be clean? This is Chris and Jenny Wilson from Aldringham, come Thorpe. And I'm going to turn to Julie first.
So again, the straight answer to the question is no. I do think that it is alarming, to say the least, that so much government money has been committed to Sizewell C ahead of a formal final investment decision. We don't even know how much Sizewell is going to cost. Government ministers have admitted to a cost of 30 billion, but a lot of us think that's far too little. We do know that they launched an equity fundraising back in September 2023. It's still ongoing, which suggests that it's not turning out to be an easy fundraise. My experience in business is that if it takes that long to get an equity deal off the ground, there's probably some issue with it that hasn't been resolved. So entering into contracts anticipatory of a final investment decision, which will now have to be made by the next government. Good luck to you on that, Jenny. I do think that it's ever so premature, and again, they're just taking this for granted, and that's part of the course.
Thank you, Chris and Jenny. Several of you may have been to public meetings I've held in the past on energy matters, and I recall one in the club in Leiston, where I did say that I did support Sizewell C, but only on the condition that both the Natural England and the Environment Agency would be content for it to proceed. And if they were opposing it, I would oppose it too. So they didn't put any objections in the way of that. So now that we are in the situation where we are, and I do think nuclear energy is an important part of the mix, yes, I do think it's good that we're getting on with the project in terms of UK government support. Of course, we will need to bring in extra investors, but better that the UK government is in the majority control rather than the French government. And that was the situation where it was EDF taking the full responsibility. So this is part of the way that we get to the spatial energy plan. It is part of the way that we get energy security. It is part of the way that we tackle climate change. So I am supportive of the government investing in Sizewell. But I think, by the way, it's absolutely critical, and it's one of my key manifesto pledges, is that we must make sure that for particularly our young people here, we get a brand new skills centre in Leiston, so that it's the young people who can definitely get those long-term jobs. Because frankly, that's one of the very few ways they will ever be able to afford to buy a home here, and that is vital to me, that we continue to make sure that young people can stay and live and work in this community. It is a great place to be.
Thank you. Labour have been clear, Energy's been clear in the plans that we set out. If Labour does form government, nuclear will play a role in that. and there's no point me implying anything other than that tonight. And it's important that it does. We've seen the events in Ukraine in the last 2 years, and the energy insecurity that I talked about, and we talked about here in the panel earlier tonight. We must have energy security. We must be able to drive forward as a nation with that confidence in our energy plans in mind. But I want to mention a few things. So, the political decision to move ahead with Sizewell has been made, and it's been made under the Conservative government in the last few years. And I do have, as I said in my last answer, I do have real sympathies that this community weren't listened to throughout that process. And as we move forward, and again I'm repeating myself, the community must be heard more as we move forward. We must have proper engagement, meaningful engagement, and we must be able to use the knowledge and the experience of everybody that has here, not just in this room, but across the communities, across Suffolk Coastal, must play a part in shaping the conversations and debates here for Sizewell and beyond. And the role, I got selected 3 months ago, and the role that I played in 3 months to me is a small reflection of the role I would play as your Labour MP with the Labour government. The first 2 stakeholders I reached out to and had conversations with as soon as I got selected was Seas and Stop Sizewell C. We had conversations, we had briefings, and I passed on a lot of the concerns that Alison raised with me directly to the Shadow Energy team, to Alan Whitehead, Dr. Alan Whitehead and his team. Now, if Labour form government, and if I represent you as your Labour MP, that role continues. I see myself as a conduit on behalf of the community, listening sincerely and reflecting those issues back to a Labour government. And the final thing I want to say, Sizewell going ahead, we must not be complacent about that community investment, about the benefits that we have here, that we can draw from it. And it's not about planting trees or community centres and small, nice community projects that come from that investment fund. It's about having meaningful jobs, and I call it the 5 E's. If I was lucky enough to be your Labour MP, there's no way that I'm not going to represent a community and tackle the real issues that exist within this community and wider society. And that's poverty. We must make sure that places like Leiston benefit from the issues that they're facing, and we can use Sizewell C as a vehicle for that. And I talk about the 5 B's really quickly: employment opportunities, energy poverty, environment, supporting the elderly, and making sure that we can support our environments as we move forward.
Out of all of that, nobody answered the question, did they?
No.
About Framatome.
No.
Okay? So I suspect I'm the most hands-on of the candidates here, and I operate in a totally different way. So if I can see Jenny and Chris afterwards, I would like a briefing, please, about Framatome. Because I'm going to put my hand up, which nobody else did, and say, I don't understand that, and I would like to know. So that's really important. Just talking about practical things, at the end of the day, sadly, the spade went in on the 15th of January. And as far as I'm concerned as a councillor, it is now my job to be watching what is taking place. There is a document called the Deed of Obligation. I brought it up at the strategic meeting the other day. And when you say, Therese, about the officers, and maybe that you feel that our councillors have relinquished our power to those officers.
Absolutely
I might
not.
remind you, it is your administration that employed them. So, I hope we've got some trust in there. But the important thing is, the deed of obligation, which is really worth looking at, is crucial to what you are going to get. It's the contract between Sizewell C, the local governments, the government, and yourselves. And therefore, say with the PPG that I sit on, as the chair, I've insisted in Leiston they get the book open to see what is available so that you are not waiting for your appointments, because you don't need to for some orange jacket that's going to pile in there and have your 9 o'clock slot. So that's really important going forwards. Also, in developing the relationship, as we have had with Seas and with everybody else, you shouldn't be finding yourselves in that situation, should you? I can't believe so many fabulous people have come to live here and they're spending tens of hundreds of pounds of their retirement money saving their beautiful home. And I think we've really got to look at that too. So I'm absolutely, with everybody here, that we've got to make some big, big changes, but you need to be protected. And that is so important, and I don't believe that's been done to date. Thank you.
Philip over here in Raydon, what can and should a Suffolk Coastal MP do about the impact of the Suffolk Energy Coast?
Oof.
And I'm going to ask Julia to go first.
I'm not sure how you put a moratorium in here, but I think if it's going to be the Labour Party that's going to be running the country, then I do hope they step forward and put a line in the sand. When my party comes in, it brings equivalence, and when often, if there's a coalition, it brings sense to the table. We need to have a plan. Nobody here can tell me that there is a plan. All there is one great big fight. In Saxmundham, to hear from a community that's not demonstrative that they are having the substation because they didn't shout loud enough is pretty outrageous, isn't it? And it's going to change everybody's lives. I think that we need to restructure how we're going to put all of this together, and there has to be some time, however long that will be, where we work collaboratively together and with the councils to find a way forward. Thank you.
Come on, Bishop.
So, the Suffolk Energy Coast, that needs to be made history, abolished, banished. And what we need to bring back is the heritage coast. Economic asset of this part of the world is our landscape, our farming heritage, our wildlife, our tourism businesses, and those are what are being put at risk by the Sizewell C development and by the energy projects, cumulatively making what has been a really attractive visitor destination into a semi-industrial wilderness. You may talk about jobs. Let's be clear about this. The number of permanent jobs that are likely to be created from Sizewell C is about 900, which is about £3.33 million per job if you take the £30 million price tag, which isn't enough anyway. Of the construction jobs, over 75% of those are likely to be people coming from outside the area. So there will be a big influx of jobs during the construction period, and they will be displacing people from holiday lettings and from hospitality businesses, and they will be taking staff away from those businesses, and they will be deterring visitors. The traffic, the congestion on the roads is going to be deterring visitors. A lot of our visitors are day trippers. They won't bother to come. So let's be clear, the Energy Coast moniker has been a disaster, and we need to banish it from our lexicon. And indeed, I think we should go one step further and talk about upgrading what we used to call the AOB, the Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty, Coasts and Heaths, into a national park.
Absolutely.
On what this part of the world is really all about. Thank you.
So, great to follow after that. So, look, energy, we've been, the Conservatives have been clear and Labour have been clear as well, that energy, the East of England will play a huge role in the delivery of energy for the UK. And Suffolk Coastal already has an important role in that, and we've seen that through the Sizewell C and the conversations that are ongoing in the National Grid upgrade. We know that we must have investment in national grid upgrades and in order to drive forward the demands that will be placed in this country in the next 10 years and well beyond. But I think the two things can be true. I think we can have conversations about how we protect our natural environment and how we drive forward our national ambition. And part of the answer to that will be about how do we make sure that all these projects that are coming on board, many of which where firm decisions haven't been made, that they have a moment for consideration and that they have the right time and data and evidence behind that. The new incoming Labour government has a lot to do, and we've talked about the first 100 days a lot within the SAP plans that Keir has set out. There's a lot to do and there's a lot to get going on. But for key projects across the East of England, across Suffolk Coast specifically, where decisions haven't been made, there absolutely must be a joined-up approach in order to drive forward on our ambition.
Thank you, Philip. The cumulative impact is absolutely vital, and it's why when I was working with the what's called JLAD, the Joint Local Authority Group, that brought to the attention of ministers. Now, hold my hands up, and so did government, we have multiple energy ministers. Just as you think you've educated one, something happens, either they resign, there's a reshuffle, whatever. So it has not been ideal. I'm not pretending otherwise. But the cumulative impact is a key element of why, in particular, thinking of the spatial energy plan, which is supposed to be devised to 2025, is why I have consistently called out for a moratorium on any further connections until we can see the entire picture, affecting not just the East of Anglia, but actually right across the UK. Now we know that some of the, one of the interconnectors, Nautilus, was being lined up actually to go to the Isle of Grain. I still believe Line Link should go there if we need it at all, and I don't believe Sea-Link really is necessary at all. So that's this element of trying to work through how the cumulative impact, but I am led to believe, even though this part of the world, if all the projects happened, would be responsible for either 30% of either the generation or the connection point of the country's entire electricity. That did go, is my understanding, to National Security Council, and various documents were agreed that that would not be a risk. Now, I will still continue to press the case on why it would be better to go closer to London. Not only will it protect...
This last question. On May 21st, the East Suffolk District and County Councils, both of those, East Suffolk District and County Councils, issued a joint letter to National Grid Ventures asking Line Link Interconnector not to land near Southwold, Walberswick, but place it at Aldeburgh Beach instead. I'm surprised that our own Green Aldeburgh and Leiston councillor be party to such a decision when we should all be looking for brownfield sites and offshore solutions, not setting location against location. Do the candidates agree with the council's approach to this issue? And this was from David Mackay here in Aldeburgh. And I'm going to turn to Jenny first.
My answer's simple. I think it's bonkers that we haven't considered brownfield first. I think it's bonkers that went to greenfield, and we need to make sure that we are having conversations about the Isle of Grain and mission works. But I think it's pretty simple.
Thank you. And to Therese.
No, I don't agree with the councils in what David has suggested that they put forward. It needs to go closer to London.
To Julian.
Yep.
So I don't think Line Link should connect in this part of the world at all. I agree with Therese that Line Link, as an interconnector going across to the Netherlands, has no need to connect in East Suffolk and should connect further south.
Thank you very much. And building just on what Julian said, I absolutely agree with him to the extent that when the letter went out, as somebody who's not on that committee, I asked if I could join so that I had a voice for you and for my residents, because at the end of the day, you are so important and I didn't want to be dismissed. But as a Lib Dem, I'm sitting behind the Greens and therefore there's a political point to be gained there, and I've asked and I'm going to join. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That was quick.
Brilliant. Well, thank you to all of you for organising tonight. It's been brilliant to come together and talk about some of the most important issues within the energy debate. And thank you all for attending and listening as well. I just want to summarise by saying it is time for change. We need to turn a page on the chaos of the government for the last 40 years, and we need a strong voice in Parliament. We're looking like the polls are saying, there's going to be a significant change with the new government, and we need a strong voice, a strong Labour MP here representing you and this community and all of Suffolk Coastal in a Labour government. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to speak to you this evening, and I will be in the church hall, in fact, on the Friday before the election. Hustings are important, however scary they may be, and they bring in the best and the worst out of all of us. They're not my top skill. Democracy is important, and Suffolk Coastal is incredibly important. And in the last year, we have seen such change at pace. In the last year, I've also attended town and parish council meetings to hear what's happening in each of those councils, because it is affecting more than just the 6 towns and the 85 villages. It's affecting people drastically in how they live their lives. We must work together, and we must make some progress to change the pathway that we're on at the moment. And for Suffolk Coastal, we must think about the fact that things haven't really changed since John Gummer stopped. And that's really important because it's the case. And also, if we're not careful, these energy projects will be wrapped up in the new government noise and the agendas, and they'll be slipping through and nobody will have noticed. So I promise you, if I happen to be selected, because frankly, Jenny, it's national polls that they're looking at for Labour to win here. We know full well that this constituency pivots, and it may well pivot to the Liberal Democrats.
Yep.
The choice is yours, but you have so much that needs to be done. And you live in a wonderful place here, but there's so much else that needs to be sorted out. And maybe here you don't feel that. And I really want you to take that thought home this evening. Thank you.
Well, can I thank everybody for coming tonight and for our organisers putting this on. I know how much this matters to people. People may not be aware this is the issue on which I ever had my first ever rebellion. When I spoke against the government, when I tried to force a division in Parliament. I was the only person, the only MP, who spoke against where we are today. And I will continue to be a strong voice. I think the approach that we have taken is wrong. I think in terms of the detail, and I want to continue to try and make sure that we get it right, that we still achieve net zero by 2050, that we still get on in terms of making sure we have energy to keep the lights on. But it must be closer to London, brownfield sites, not damaging our green fields, not damaging our communities. Thank you.
So thank you all for coming tonight and listening to us. I'm proud to represent the Green Party. I've tried to avoid making party political points tonight because we're talking about the specifics of the energy projects in Sizewell C. And I think I'm going to stick to that in my closing remarks. Let's be serious. Sizewell C is not likely to come online, if it does get built at all, until 2035. It can make no contribution to decarbonising the electricity generation system before 2030, which is Labour Party policy. More likely than not, if it does get a final investment decision, it will run into the kind of delays that have been common with the European pressurised reactor in all other sites, which average something like 10 to 14 years. And it will be over budget, it will be a white elephant. There's a good chance it will end up like phase 2 of HS2 and never be finished. So let's be serious. This is such a complicated machine to build that even EDF have abandoned the EPR. This will be the last one they build if they do build it. And they've said it's too complicated to do, and they're looking to a new generation of simpler reactors. It's just too complicated to build, it's too risky, there is no water supply, there's a receding coastline, it's going to damage our wildlife, it's going to destroy our tourism business. Why the hell would you want to do it? Thank you.
Yes.
Thank Therese, Julian, Julia and Jenny for what has been, I think, a very constructive time together. I mean, we've listened to they've given us answers. They've not necessarily answered the questions, but they've given us answers. And we've heard, I think we've got a pretty good flavour and sense of the positions on this particular issue that's of crucial importance to this part of Suffolk. So I want to thank them for their very willing and positive contribution to this. And can I thank you for being such an amazing congregation? I wish I had responsive congregations like this
Where's the collection?
all the time. Yes, we're going to take a collection out.
Yeah, afterwards.
But just to hand over to our hosts who will wind up for us.
Richard.
Campaign groups and all those attending tonight, I would like to express our huge gratitude to Bishop Martin for chairing.
Well done.
A very lively discussion with firmness and fairness. Thank you to Aldeburgh Church for hosting tonight's hustings and to the 4 candidates for participating so absolutely brilliantly. It has been quite a challenge to choose the questions because there were so many relevant questions raised by the local community, for which we say a big thank you. But do not worry, there are more hustings coming up for the community. One that we've been asked to publicise is on the 19th of June at St John's Felixstowe, is it?
No,
Yep. St John's Felixstowe.
St John's Felixstowe, and 4 candidates have answered and are coming. We're waiting for a 5th reply from another candidate who hasn't replied yet.
7 p.m. Okay, and there are other hustings, one at Saxmundham that I know about and others. So watch out for the publication of those hustings. Please do attend. You can also send your questions to the campaign groups for publication and further airing. And we will be sending them on to the political candidates and to the political parties. It is clear from tonight how these issues are central to the national energy infrastructure debate, not just for this community, but to the whole of the country. And we feel frustrated that we have not been listened to and our concerns have been ignored by many. We wish all these candidates go away from these hustings having listened hard, to think deeply about what they can do to make a material difference to positive outcomes for Suffolk Coast and Heaths. Good evening to all. Please can we now filter out from the back first? Thank you.
Let me just say something about just a few words about this evening.
Yeah, I thought it was good.
Yeah.
Well,
So I was really encouraged
Yes.
that the candidates by and large answered the questions. I mean, there were some that they dodged,
Sideways.
but I thought it was
Fair.
It was taken seriously.
Yeah.
And the strongest message that came through was that, from my perspective, was the candidates recognised that these issues about energy
Are massive.
are huge issues, and they've got to engage with them, and they've got to have a bigger impact.
That sounds good. Thank you very much, Bishop, and nice to see you.